Good afternoon, everyone. So, today I'm going to be talking about human trafficking in Latin America and how to confront the human trafficking and sexual exploitation of Venezuelan women that are currently residing in Colombia. When individuals are forced to flee their home, there are a greater risk of exploitation. Human trafficking has been a persistent problem in Latin America, and not only Latin America, but also in the Caribbean. However, the continued migration of these Venezuelans has been the largest in the Western Hemisphere. Demands, and this sort of like, in my opinion, demands uh, stricter regulations, more resources for the victims, including the prevention and and giving them some sort of education as to what human trafficking is. I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail. Okay, so I included this map here in case any of you are interested in taking a look um, as to other countries in Central America and America that um, and the Caribbean that are dealing with the current Venezuelan migration crisis. And if you look at them, if you look at all the yellows and the purple ones, it's like human trafficking. So it'll make it easy for you guys. Okay, moving on. So I'm not going to be discussing men and boys, but I just want to point out that they're largely affected of when it comes to the trafficking labor force. So I just wanted to point that out so that you guys know that like everything else, yes, men are affected um, of human trafficking, sexual exploitation, and everything. But in Colombia right now, that's like the major problem that men are facing, and boys too, just labor trafficking. So I'm talking about women for two reasons. The number, because I find that the number of female Venezuelans victim is like a skyrocket at this point. It's on a high rise. Women are girls. We face different distant risks. So I just wanted to go that way, that route. Okay, so some important facts. As of June 2019, more than 4 million Venezuelans have fled the economic and political chaos of their country. And the reason being is because they don't have access to food, water, medicine. So all of these things are very limited, and public services in their country are really breaking down. Okay. Um, some of the reasons that people flee from Venezuela a lot of the times is political persecution, gang, any sort of violence, religion, etc. So there's different type of reasons why people are targeted in Venezuela and why they have to flee. Okay, so the data from the Colombian Ministry of Interior revealed that between 2013 and 2019, there were 422 registered cases of Venezuelan victims of trafficking within the country. So more than 200 of these cases involve sexual exploitation of women. So just like everywhere else, like there's a lot of human trafficking victims that don't report their the violation that they suffer. So moving on into 2003, the Colombian government signed the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime and the Protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children. In 2018, no trafficking prosecutions resulted in convictions in Colombia. I'm not surprised. Okay, and I'm actually like I really shocked about the fact that I couldn't find any like public case law. I even try everything from Google, JSTOR, and everything at this end, and then I had my family in Colombia try to like find some case law for me at the library there or at the courthouse, and to no avail, because it is the process. It takes months and months and months to just even get a response to um, as to whether a law student can view that, or they can send it to a law student. So, okay, moving on. Sorry. Um, so I posted another map here because I just want you guys to see the difference between the amount of Venezuelans who are currently being, um, well, the number of Venezuelans who are currently in Colombia, um, compared to other countries. Okay, and how it makes sense that this amount is was causing a lot of trafficking. You know, the more people that go into a country, especially because it's easier for them just to cross the border to Colombia, then the more trafficking that promotes. Okay, so the key themes and findings that I sort of touched or read upon as I was researching is that first, if Venezuelans have safe and legal pathways to enter Colombia, they will be less likely to fall into the hands of the traffickers. That being because if they have, like, if they were given asylum or refugee status, then they will not have to rely on a human trafficker because then they can go get their own work permits, they can go get their own jobs, and they can move on. Okay, unless they're circumstantial victims of human trafficking, you know, because it can happen to anybody of any socioeconomic status. Okay, so the second risk, the other thing that I discovered is that Venezuelan refugees currently in Colombia need to be given legal status again, so that they can actually, in this case, report the crime. Okay, like the first part was that they don't like to, they might end up in the hands of the traffickers, but this second point is that if they're not given their legal status, then they're not going to want to report those sort of crimes to the authorities, which makes sense because that's how a lot of immigrants are here um, in the U.S. and working with a lot of them. As soon as you mention anything to do with police, or let's report that or that, you can tell that they're like kind of like, no, I'm gonna go find another attorney or something like that, you know, because they don't want to at all because they just think that immigration is gonna like come knocking down on their door and deport them. Okay, the third, without the right to work, displaced Venezuelans are at a higher risk of falling prey to exploitative situations to survive financially. Okay, so now I'm gonna play a 3 minute video. I just want you guys to be able to connect in a personal level. So I thought that this would be the best way to do it. I included at the bottom right here the conversion because in the video they're gonna talk about 100,000 pesos, and I don't want you guys to think that that equals U.S. currency. So I just went ahead and did it for you guys at the bottom. Okay, so here we go. I hope you guys enjoyed the video.
On the streets of the Colombian border town Cucuta, you can buy pretty much anything, and Venezuelan women are selling themselves just to survive. One woman tells our colleague she charges 100,000 pesos for 15 minutes. For these girls, it's an equivalent fortune in Venezuela right now. We film secretly inside one of the brothels. They don't like cameras much here. Inside, all but 2 of the women are Venezuelan. They're part of the mass influx of people driven out of their country through desperation. What sort of work did you do there? 2 of the women agreed to come with us.
I'm sorry.
On the streets of the Colombian border town Cucuta, you can buy pretty much anything, and Venezuelan women are selling themselves just to survive. One woman tells our colleague she charges 100,000 pesos for 15 minutes. For these girls, it's an equivalent fortune in Venezuela right now. We film secretly inside one of the brothels. They don't like cameras much here. Inside, all but 2 of the women are Venezuelan. They're part of the mass influx of people driven out of their country through desperation. What sort of work did you do there? Two of the women agreed to come with us away from the brothel and their pimps to explain why they've been driven to do this work. They tell me both of them are mothers. One's left her two children in Caracas with her mother. The other has brought her young baby with her. I can't really tell anyone about my work, she says, because people just discriminate against you. Most people just won't understand that this is a huge sacrifice that I do for my family. I don't feel very good about this work, she says, because you have to cope with a lot of horrible stuff, and I don't sleep very well. But I have children and a family, and I have to deal with it. And as I'm not legal here, I can't find a proper job, so I have to do something to provide for my family. They feel trapped and powerless, and every day there are more women like them coming over and finding selling sex is one way of surviving. I do this because I have to do it. I don't do drugs, I don't drink, I just do this. If I could do anything better, I'd do it, and I'd stop this straight away. And both blame the economic collapse across the border. I can't find food supplies or medicine, and with the new currency, everything has worsened. There is no cash. I cannot find anything, and the banks are closed. We have to make a line to pay everything. So tough decisions are being taken everywhere. Small-time smugglers spend the night ferrying anything they can across to Colombia. They'll earn far more here than back home, where hyperinflation has all but collapsed the economy. There are multiple back routes which the smugglers are using all night long to take away piles of contraband. These are just things that they can sell for twice, 3 times, 4 times the amount as what they'd get in their own country. Venezuela was once among Latin America's richest nations, with the world's largest oil reserves. But the economic and political crisis has left so many of her citizens homeless, destitute, and desperate. Alex Crawford, Sky News, in Cucuta, Colombia.
Okay, so if you guys have any thoughts, just follow Professor Page instructions, and if you guys have any questions, do the same. So why does human trafficking keep increasing in Colombia? The main driver of human trafficking in Colombia is the legal requirements needed to enter the country. So although no visa is required, you still have to have proper identification, either a national ID from Venezuela or a passport. So a lot of the times is nearly impossible for right now for Venezuelans to either renew or obtain any of this documentation because of the current crisis and the limited operational of the operations of the government, and so it's gonna take a while. If not, they might not be able to get their passport or national ID or anything like that anytime soon, which means that they're probably gonna try to enter Colombia illegally. Like as we saw in the video, like the smugglers, and so they're gonna have to um, deal with that. And as like the women in the video were saying, like, hey, we're mothers, we left our kids back at home, and we can survive other than by doing this. So you know I find it, quite interesting why a lot of people had to go through that we could not take for granted. Um, um, so it was only March 2019 that Colombia announced that it would begin accepting passports up to 2 years past their expiration date. So after 2 years, you're gonna have to go back and petition in the Venezuela administration to have them renew your passport or your national ID, which again is probably gonna take them another 2 years, if not to provide it to you. So I feel like you just, I don't know. I just feel like if the Venezuelan government could fix this and allow people to have this so that they can immigrate to Colombia, I feel like it will be easier. Um, Venezuelans, we know, like I said before, Venezuelans without documentation are forced to enter the country via unofficial illegal route. Um, okay, so what are some of the other factors that contribute to the underreporting of human trafficking? Among those factors are the fact that the crimes take place in several locations, meaning that since there is no like governmental like communication um, between the cities, towns. So if let's say something happened in Cali and we had like this mass ring of human trafficking and everything, and they get arrested and everything, then that that institution would not let the provide the documentation to everybody else because there is no sort of like a register, like national registration where people can communicate. I just feel like there has to be a way to communicate so that you're not letting out repeat like if you're arresting like a human trafficker, I feel like you should be able to like I don't know communicate to other counties and towns, like I said before. I don't, I think it's just very important for there to be like a mandatory like registration database. So lack of an effective victims protection program. Um, I think that is very important because we know that a lot of these women are already victims. So I think that at this point, it will be better for them if we just, if Colombia creates some sort of like protection program for them. But in realistically, I don't know if Colombia actually has the funds to do so. Okay. Like I said before, the inexistence of a centralized data collection system, and as well as like the threats that they've received from the traffickers and against themselves or themselves or the family. Okay, so another factor is that women often don't like to identify themselves as victims, and a lot of the time that's because they don't want to carry that stigma. They don't want everyone to know that they're victims and that they were and the kind of work that they do because they feel ashamed. Okay. And lastly is the fact that they may have to disrupt the authorities, which goes again, it ties into that whole idea that immigrants don't like to talk to the police, report anything to the police, especially when they don't have legal status. Um, so Colombia, like I said, Colombia has taken the positive step of registering large numbers of Venezuelans. Of the more than 440 people recently registered by the Colombian government, approximately 280,000 of them had obtained residence and work permits. So that is good progress. And as of November 2019, just over 670,000 Venezuelans have regular status in Colombia. However, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees estimates that as of November 2019, there are still almost 490,000 Venezuelans in Colombia without legal status or without appropriate documentation. So remember when I show you guys the map a few slides back where it says that the amount of population of Venezuelans in Colombia who are dealing with trafficking is around 600,000. So, I mean, who have migrated to Colombia is 600,000. So you guys can sort of see how many are actually getting help and how many of them don't have like still don't have legal status, which is sort of the reasons why they are prey for human traffickers. Okay, so according to the release, uh, the last, oh, sorry. Okay, so according to the last release, 2020, according to the latest release 2019 US TIP, which is Trafficking in Persons Report, Colombia is currently tier 1 country. So what does this mean? It means that Colombia is doing the minimum, the bare minimum standards and efforts to fight trafficking. That is exactly what that means. Okay, so to maintain a tier one ranking, um, governments need to demonstrate appreciable progress each year. Okay, when I was doing my readings, I noticed that the progress that they wanted to make doesn't have to be significant. It just has to be some sort of progress, you know. So I think that that's when we see a lot of these little programs like, you know, 2016 they did the database, 2019 they did that. So like I think that Colombia is just trying to like appease the UN at this point. Okay, so um, I included like what some of these efforts are including, and it's like investigating more trafficking cases, launching new national anti-trafficking information system, investigating and prosecuting, which I'm gonna talk about more later on, and convicting the first case um, of domestic violence. So I think that that effort convicting the first case of domestic servitude um, is an amazing. Well, it's kind of sad that it took them so long, but is relieving at least that they're taking that step to start prosecuting. Okay, and I'll talk a lot about that a little bit. Okay, so anti-trafficking efforts by the Colombian government and other actors. So when it comes to Colombia, the head of the interagency committee for the fight against trafficking in persons explained that in addition to state institutions, this group has 88 local anti-trafficking committees, which are responsible for partnerships with non-governmental organizations. Funny enough, when I went into their websites, in their interagency committee website, I couldn't find much information about the committees. Like they listed it and like a little description, but it wasn't like I couldn't find anything specific, like as to what do they actually do. Um, you know what the ADA local um, committees are actually doing and stuff like that. So I was kind of sad that I couldn't get more details to in regards to that. Internationally, in June 2019, the International Organization for Immigration, the IOM, launched an awareness raising campaign designed to help Venezuelans in Colombia understand the dangers of trafficking so that they are better able to protect themselves, um, which it kind of upsets me because I feel like since this crisis has been increasing and increasing, I feel like it's kind of sort of like why did it took you like 2 3 years to finally um, come up to I don't know to create this sort of awareness campaign when you could have done so like a few years back, but um, that's so I'm posting the question: is this enough? And in my opinion, I don't think so. Um, because I think I just genuinely feel that there's a lot that still needs to be done. And I'm going to make some suggestions and recommendations as to what I think needs to be done later on. But right now, the main concern that I had when I was writing this paper is the fact that I couldn't find any like public case law that is available to the public. Sorry, so that was kind of like I was kind of trying to find out why, and a lot of the articles that I read kept mentioning like private issues, the age of the victims, and the government requires victims to consent to for them to release the information, and of course because of their legal status, everything that they're going through, Venezuelan victims don't like to get involved with authorities and report or give any consent. Okay, since I didn't find any case law that deals directly with like human trafficking of Venezuelan in Colombia, I went ahead and found an article that is dated for 2018, and it's called Colombian Failing to Fight Sexual Exploitation, Officials Admit. And I went ahead and included the link in case you guys uh, want to go in, check it out, and then just read it. And it's this article basically summarizing that Colombia is not really doing much when it comes to fighting child sexual exploitation. So you can kind of infer that is the same for women and girls who are human victims of human trafficking. Okay. So some of the quotes that I found from top Colombian officials, I kind of like try to like substitute the fact that I didn't find any case law with different things. So like I found that article so you guys can get like a little bit idea. Then I found these top quotes from Colombian officials because I thought that is kind of like interesting that even these top officials who have this job of helping these people, regulating these committees, distributing resources, etc., sound so helpless. Like they sound so helpless, like they're just giving up. So I'm just gonna briefly read two or three quotes. Okay, so the country inspector general Fernando Carrillo said there is little reliable data on women and girls' sexual exploitation, partly because very few witnesses or victims come forward to report this crime, and because of social tolerance of the issue. Okay. Um, he also said that I think that this is one of the worst problems that the country has, and he's the one who has a judicial body that holds public servants to accounts. So, and he also said that I'm up and up until now, it hasn't been addressed in an earnest way with data and above all with a commitment at the national, provincial, and municipal municipal level. So basically, he's saying like, I know what my job is, what my task is, and he's still saying we haven't addressed any of this. Um, so, and I included another one so you guys sort of see, what's going on and what the top officials are actually saying, which is like they're not being very optimistic at all. So the last quote here. Impunity regarding the issue of sexual violence against migrants in Colombia exceeds 90%, and this is due to investigations being focused on the victims. So, another reason why investigations don't go anywhere is because the police bring in like let's say the victim reports, the police want to force them to come in and go through this whole lengthy investigation and everything, but they want, rather than doing the investigation themselves, they want women to provide they do all the work for them, provide them with all the information. If women can't do it, then they take notes, like everything else. They take notes. Yeah, we'll get back to you later. And of course, they don't. I'm sure some of them do, but um, I'm sure the majority doesn't. Okay, so the first conviction in Colombia for trafficking in persons for domestic servitude. I found this case. It was actually like published in the UN website, and I found it, and I found very shocking that the first like ever domestic servitude case happened was handed down in September 2018. 2018. 2018. I don't know. I found that kind of ridiculous. Um, so I put some of the facts here so you guys can read it. And basically, like, it's again like taking advantage of women who are indigenous and making them go into domestic servitude with no pay or low pay, and they'll receive no salary sometimes for months, because they're relying on the employer to pay them, or or whoever the household to pay them for their work. Okay, so some of the possible solution and recommendations that I came up with after doing so much research on this topic is that first, give the Venezuelan legal status. I already talked the length, so I'm just gonna move on. I just feel like if you don't give people legal status, then everybody else is going to take advantage of that. I mean, is what I witness a lot. Okay. Second, screen for human trafficking indicators among incoming Venezuelans. Again, the border. I know that they probably don't have like the staff at the border or the CBPD officers, but still, we need to have a way to screen people, either like have them, I don't know, give them as this waiting in line, give them like a survey or something like, are you here because I don't know, were you trafficked in Venezuela? Like, what are your issues? Like, where are you going? Do you need assistance? Here is some pamphlets or something. I feel like there needs to be something more done. Either like get more staff, get more social workers, get I don't know kids. I mean not kids, but get like law school students to volunteer. Um, you know, I don't know. I think that there has to be like I don't know, like a month where or like a whole semester where people have to volunteer at the border, at the different borders. Not just, of course, we can go to the Venezuelan, we can't go to the Venezuelan Colombian border, but that doesn't mean that we can go volunteer at the Mexican border. Just putting out there. Okay, moving on. Okay, third, I think that they should guarantee victims that victims won't be penalized because, again, if you're a victim and you're going to the police station and you're trying to explain to them that you're a victim, in Colombia, most of the time they're going to arrest you and charge you with prostitution, and it doesn't matter if you have witnesses that can prove it or you know because um unfortunately like women who are prostitutes in Colombia are like lower class, so so like everything else, people don't want to talk to them, people don't care about their problems. Okay, for um, informing trafficking victims of their basic rights and provide access to legal assistance. Throughout my research, I didn't come across anything that said that they had like pro bono lawyers or anything like that. I'm sure they do, but like I was expecting to find more rhetoric about that, but I didn't. So I don't know, but they do have it. I don't want to say that they don't have it, but I feel like there should be they should implement more. They should provide just more legal assistance, more resources in general for people. That's just like my take on all of this. Uh, that yeah, they're making progress, and it's funny because a lot of the international institutions are the ones who are sending help to Colombia, like trying to provide them with these resources, and one of them is the UN, as well as the interagency that I previously talked about. Excuse me. Okay, so they should like increase assistance for victims of trafficking, including housing and psychological support. Um, because I feel like if they have safe accommodation, psychological support before they can fall into being prey of human trafficking, and after, because I know that people always focus after like what is after the human trafficking, but I feel like I'm trying to I want to work I'm trying to work on preventing it, before it happens. Like I think that's one, I don't know, I think people should just prioritize that, like provide more information, because not a lot of people know about human trafficking. When you live in a foreign country, you don't have like the luxury of being like, oh, what's human trafficking, because you're trying to survive. That's it, you survive, you work, like there is no time for people to know, honestly, generally know all these things, unless they watch the news. So provide alternative income generating opportunities. Um, I noticed that in Mexico, like they're providing women with like jobs at sweatshops, but it's like not really a sweatshop because it's more like an organization, and then they sew. But like women come in, they do sewing, they sell it and everything. But to me, it just sounds like a sweatshop. But that's at least giving them income enough where they don't have to fall prey um, to human trafficking, and they can take care of themselves and hopefully say whatever they can, which is not going to be that much, or until they can find a better job or get the legal status. Also, coordinate anti-trafficking efforts and service provision for victims across the country. The reason being that police and prosecutors in Colombia should have referral mechanisms whereby cases can be tracked and pursued across the border. So again, let's say Venezuelan victim comes here, or we have a human trafficker that came from Venezuela to Colombia. I want, I would love if they will prosecute first the human trafficker, even if they flee back to Venezuela. I think that that should be the main priority. Make sure that, because not all the human traffickers are Colombian. I just want to point it out. Like there's all kinds of people, like I'm sure terrorists, like good people, all kinds of people coming across the border, including human traffickers, because they're bringing girls, boys, etc., or they're picking up at Colombian women, Colombian girls and boys to bring back to Venezuela. So that's the end of my presentation, and I just want to end with this quote really quick. So, human trafficking is a scourge, crime against the whole humanity. It is time to join forces and work together to free its victims and to eradicate this crime that affects all of us, from individual families to the worldwide community. And this quote was by Pope Francis. So, if you guys have any questions, please follow Professor's page instructions. Okay, have a good day.